ball metaphenomena with all the various ideas about it attached. So that's how it came to be. It just hit me that this might be something that people might want to read. And my intention was to write a book where if somebody is busy and they don't have a lot of time and they're not really familiar with the whole paranormal UFO field, that they could read my book, which is 545 pages, and pretty much get an entire history and synopsis of how a lot of these mysterious phenomena that are happening on the planet, including missing people and the whole nine yards, may fit into the same metaphenomena. And since I wrote the book, I've gotten really big into trying to understand quantum mechanics as much as I can. I've read a lot since my book was published with Dr. Carlo Rovelli. He's an Italian loop quantum gravity physicist, and he's written a couple of excellent books, The Order of Time and Reality is Not What It Seems. And Sean Carroll, Dr. Sean Carroll, There's Something Deeply Hidden and The Big Picture. I would recommend those two books. So an even expanded picture of where I was coming from in 2016 it has occurred since then in the last 3 years. So it's an ongoing learning process. We will never completely understand who these visitors are that are interacting with us with the perceptual apparatus that we have. And what I noticed in the research is that many authors like John Keel and even back to Meade Lane and Ivan Sanderson and all these folks, Jacques Vallée, there was an undercurrent of a technological progression or a technological aspiration, and it hit me at some point. These people are talking about the impending singularity. So in the book, I go into the history of the singularity back to I.J. Good in 1965, a science fiction writer, Werner Vinge, who coined the phrase, Ray Kurzweil, who wrote The Singularity is Near. So I personally tentatively accept the idea that part and parcel of the interaction that non-human intelligences have had with the human race is going to culminate in this pending phenomena that we refer to as the technological singularity. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, I got to ask you a question, too, which, what type of near-death experience? What happened?
Okay, well, on August the 18th of 2009, I started out in life as a salesman. I've sold about everything, but I got dissatisfied with my psychological interaction between me and the rest of humanity, so I wanted something different. So I went to college for 4 years and became an occupational therapist, and I've worked for about 22 years here locally as an occupational therapist, and that doesn't have anything to do with getting people jobs. It has to do with restoring independence in people who have lost their physical or mental ability to function. Dressing, grooming, bathing, toileting, feeding, basic stuff, whether through wheelchair seating and positioning or adaptive equipment or exercises or whatever they need to get back to normal. But I just went home one afternoon. I was going to mow my grass and then go back to work. And I opened up the garage door, started my lawnmower, and I went about 15 feet. And a very heavy fatigue came over me. And the first thing I thought was dehydration. So I went inside the house and I hydrated myself, and I laid down in the air conditioning and kind of flip-flopped until I started feeling better. So I went back out and started the lawnmower up again and went about another 15 feet. And the same thing happened, only about 10 times worse. And I suddenly realized for sure what was happening to me. I was having a heart attack that was probably going to kill me. And a lot of things crossed my mind. Stupid things cross your mind when you know you're going to pass, because I sort of felt like my curiosity was going to be satisfied. I was sort of agnostic, or whatever you want to call it, at that point in time. And the first emotion that I actually felt wasn't fear or terror. It was curiosity and anticipation about, well, now I'm going to know. So I didn't want to hit my head on the rocks when I fell down and died. So I started going round and round circle like a dog does when it's doing its business, because I didn't want to hit my head on gravel and people find me bloody. And then before I had a chance to do that, I realized I was going. And I stood back up, and for some reason I felt compelled to look in the direction of the sun. It was a nice sunny August day. And I would later come to know this as the Oz factor that a lot of the UFO researchers talk about with UFO encounters, where time sort of stands still, and it's silent. All the road noises and the birds are silent. And a very surprising thing happened, which was familiar entities, people that I'm quite familiar with, started accumulating in my presence. And I got a positive ID in my mind, who these people were. And to my surprise, I was there, which was really weird. And the other people, some of them were living their lives. I mean, I know these people to be alive and living their life here on Earth, and that really puzzled me. And I was all prepared to go through the veil and reunite with, whatever this version of my higher self or whatever this was, and with all these people who I felt so tied to and familiar with, like family. But I got like an instant download in my mind. It was like a choice, and I would come later on to realize that this choice phase is very, very common in the near-death experience literature, where it's like, okay, if you want to live, you got to make up your mind. Are you sure you want to? You're welcome to come on over to the other side where we are and reemerge back into this other reality, like you're waking up from a dream. But life here on Earth is very precious, and there was a couple of people in my life where relationships had gone afoul that came to mind, and I wanted to rectify those. So I made an instant decision to live, since I was being given a choice, and I got the impression that I needed to make up my mind pretty darn quick. So that whole thing went away. I went back in my house. I got the keys to my car, and I had total confidence that I wasn't going to die on the way to the hospital. Most people would have called an ambulance, but I drove myself in my 2000 triple black Camaro convertible, and I pulled up here to the Henry County Hospital and got out, and I walked in to the information desk with the keys in my hand and asked them if they'd park my car and bring me my keys to wherever they would take me. So they took me in a little room, and I hear morphine, the doctor shouting out. He confirms that I'm having a major heart attack, but they weren't really prepared to deal with me at the Henry County Hospital, so they had to ship me up to Muncie, which is about a 40-minute drive. And my first reaction was, oh, boy, I get an ambulance ride, because as a kid, I always saw the ambulances with the lights flashing and everything, and I wondered what the people on the stretchers were feeling. And it's like, now I was going to find out. So when they wheeled me out back in the sunshine, load me up in the ambulance, I remembered my friends that showed up in my yard, these etheric entities that I got some positive IDs on, and I felt very comforted by that. So I had total confidence that I was going to make it. I wound up going to the Muncie Ball Hospital at Muncie, and when I got there, the surgeons were all scrubbed up, ready to go, and they gave me another choice to make. First, I had to decide whether to live or not. Now I have to decide whether I want to get a quadruple bypass or try some stents, which may or may not work. So they gave me the rundown of this, and after having the bypass explained to me, I elected to try the stents first because that's a lot less invasive. So I got to watch that. I was laying down, and I don't know what kind of drugs they gave me, but it was really good because when they stuck the big, thick needle in my femoral artery and blood goes everywhere, I was like, that would really hurt, but I really don't care right now. So I got to watch it on the TV where they showed me the collapsed arteries. They're explaining this to me. I got a doctor above me with these little bifocal, microscope goggles on, and he was an expert. I forget the doctor's name, but he was guiding me through the whole thing. And when the little Chinese handcuff gets up there in the artery, going to it's like a hose where you just twisted it. It's like, this isn't going to work. It's going to break. And it pops open, and they did number one and did number two, and they said they got them both in. So one of the people that showed up in my yard was a woman that I had actually broken up with. We had dated about 3 years, and she wanted to get married, and I didn't. I'd already been married and divorced twice. So she was on my mind. Well, when they wheeled me out, guess who was standing there with tears running down her face, mascara running, was Julie. So as they took me to my room that I was going to spend one night in recovery from the femoral stick, they have to put pressure on that so that it heals properly, and they watch you overnight. I told myself, I'm going to fix this. So I chose an alternate path. I mean, my original decision was that I didn't want to get married ever again. And when I passed her, because they wouldn't let her in because she wasn't family, and I felt really terrible about that she came to see me and they wouldn't let her in. About 2 months later, that October 30th, we flew to Las Vegas and got married. And we've been married for 10 years, and I'm really happy that I rectified that relationship, and there's a couple of other relationships that I've successfully rectified. And that was one of the major takeaways that I got from this near-death experience, is that you want harmonious relationships with the people that you love, and if they're broken in some way or not what they should be, we need to put effort into it to rectify it before we actually pass from this world. So I've done my best, in the last 10 years. Like I said, I just got back from Florida. There's a dear friend I met when I was 8 years old, and it's been 6 years since I saw him. So I took the time and I went down there. We flew a control line model airplane for the first time in 52 years. It was great. So that is that whole experience. But then I became very, very curious about everything paranormal, so I just immersed myself. I wound up buying bookcases at Walmart. Now my man cave is surrounded by about 10 bookcases stuffed with all kinds of books that I've accumulated on eBay or Amazon. I buy used books, to save money, and I highlight them heavily. They're not going to be worth anything when I go to resell them because they're heavily highlighted because they got great ideas. But one of the things Whitley Strieber said in your previous interview was people don't understand the gulf that exists between our world and theirs. That hit me right between the eyes because that's something I've been very focused on in trying to understand quantum mechanics and how the physical universe can be in superposition with an eternal infinite probability field, and how parallel worlds are continually decohering from the world that we know based on different decisions that people make. There's an alternative universe, so says Dr. Sean Carroll and a whole bunch of others that buy into the multiverse theory, where they're continually being spawned, and there's all these alternative selves out there in these other parallel timelines, which is very fascinating. So that's what I've immersed myself into for the last 3 years anyway.
Well, hey, Russell, we need to take a break. And then after the break, we got a 5-minute newscast. So you got about 8 minutes to go get a cup of Java, a cup of tea, or what have you. I'm going to put you on mute, so don't hang up. We'll be back talking to Russell about his book, about the paranormal, UFOs, aliens, and all that stuff in about 8 minutes. You're listening to me, Gary, on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark.